On a frozen morning in Siberia, a dead woman was carried out of a Soviet prison camp on a wooden stretcher, and the guards who hauled her to the mass grave never once stopped to ask the only question that mattered: whether the body on those planks was still breathing, because Sister Maria had already learned the cruelest secret of the gulags, which is that the dead ask no questions, the dead feel no cold, and the dead are the only ones who ever leave those gates twice. Before I tell you how she pulled off the most impossible escape in the history of the Soviet prison system, I need you to do something for me, because stories like this one only survive when people keep them alive. So if you want more true stories of brave nuns, wartime heroes, and secret missions that history tried to bury, then hit that subscribe button on The Secret Nun right now and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear is a story the Soviet Union spent decades trying to make sure no one would ever repeat. It all begins not in the Gulag at all, but in a small village where Maria, a quiet young woman who had given her whole life to God, was arrested in the middle of the night for the simple crime of refusing to renounce her faith. And when the soldiers dragged her out of the chapel in her nightclothes, they laughed and told her that her God could not hear her from so far north, which is exactly the kind of thing a person remembers when the temperature drops to 40 degrees below zero and every breath feels like swallowing glass. They sentenced her to 10 years of hard labor for being, in their words, an enemy of the people, which meant a nun who had spent her life in prayer and silence was now chained to other prisoners and forced to haul timber through snow that reached her waist. And yet the part that broke most prisoners was not the work or the cold or even the hunger. It was the slow realization that the camp was designed to erase a person's soul before it ever got around to killing the body, because once a prisoner stopped believing she would ever see home again, once she stopped hoping, the guards had already won. And this is where most people would have given up, where any normal person would have curled into the snow and let the cold do its quiet work. But Sister Maria was not most people, and one night, lying on the frozen floor of the barracks with nothing but a thin blanket between her bones and the ice, she had an idea so insane that even she almost dismissed it, an idea that would require her to do the one thing no living human being should ever have to do, which was to stop being alive. Completely and convincingly, for 9 straight days. The plan came to her because she had watched, too many times, what happened when a prisoner died in the camp, which was that the guards, afraid of disease and far too lazy to bury the dead with any care, would simply wrap the body in whatever cloth was available, load it onto a cart, and haul it out beyond the perimeter to a shallow trench where the bodies were dumped like firewood. And she realized that if she could convince the guards she was dead, she would be carried out of the camp the same way every corpse was carried out, not as a prisoner to be watched, but as a body to be forgotten, and forgotten was exactly what she needed to be. The problem, of course, was that pretending to be dead is not something a person can practice, because there is no rehearsal for lying perfectly still for more than a week while your body screams for water and your muscles cramp and your own mind turns against you. And yet she understood that the alternative was a slow death in the timber line, so she began to prepare in the only way a nun could, which was to pray for the strength to do the unthinkable. She chose her moment with terrifying care, waiting until the guards were distracted by a new shipment of prisoners and the chaos of the camp was at its peak, and then she simply lay down on her bunk one evening, closed her eyes, and made a decision that no one else in the camp would ever know she had made, and she let her breathing slow until it was so shallow that even the woman sleeping beside her would not have noticed the tiny rise and fall of her chest. For the first day, she lay perfectly still while the other prisoners moved around her, and she listened to them talk about her, heard them whisper that Sister Maria looked ill, heard one of them say she had not eaten, and the hardest part of that first day was not the hunger or the thirst, it was resisting the urge to open her eyes and tell them she was fine, because every instinct in her body was screaming at her to move, to stretch, to simply turn over, and she had to fight that instinct 1 minute at a time, 1 breath at a time. By the second day, the prisoners had started to believe something was truly wrong with her, because a person who will not eat and will not speak and will not so much as twitch is a person who has already begun to leave this world, and the guards, when they were finally called, did exactly what Sister Maria had prayed they would do, which was to glance at her still form and pronounce her near death, too weak to work, too sick to be worth the food it would take to keep her alive, and in that moment she understood with a strange, cold clarity that the camp's cruelty was about to become her salvation. On the third day, the real test began, because her body had never once been this still for this long, and the cramping in her legs became a fire she could not put out, a pain that spread up through her hips and into her spine, and she lay there in the dark, willing herself not to scream, biting down so hard on the inside of her cheek that she tasted blood, and she told herself over and over that the pain was proof she was still alive, and being alive meant she still had a chance. The fourth day was when she stopped feeling the cold, which terrified her more than the pain ever had, because the cold was supposed to be the thing that kept her awake, and when her body went numb she realized she was slipping into a state where she might actually die without meaning to, where the pretense could become the reality, and so she forced herself to stay conscious by running the same prayer through her mind 1,000 times, each word a rope she gripped so she would not fall into the blackness that was waiting for her at the edge of every thought. On the fifth day, the other prisoners began to treat her as a body already, covering her with an extra scrap of cloth as if she were already gone, speaking about her in the past tense, and she lay beneath that cloth listening to them mourn her, and the strangest thing was that she felt a kind of peace in it, because being mourned meant the performance was working, meant the camp believed she was finished, and every hour that passed without a guard noticing her breath was an hour that brought her closer to the gate. The sixth day nearly ended everything, because a guard who was checking the barracks for any sign of illness walked past her bunk and stopped, and she could feel his eyes on her through the cloth, could feel him leaning closer, and in that frozen moment she let her breath go so completely still that her lungs burned with the need for air, and she held it until she thought her chest would burst, held it past the point where her vision went white behind her closed eyes, and only when she heard his boots move away did she let the air rush back into her body in the smallest, quietest gasp of her life, a sound so faint that not even the woman beside her stirred. The seventh day was the day she stopped being afraid of dying and started being afraid of living, because she had been motionless for so long that she was no longer sure her legs would work when the time came, and the terrible thought crossed her mind that she might have escaped the Gulag only to die in the snow outside it, too weak to walk, too broken to run, and so she began to move, just barely, just a fraction at a time, tensing the muscles in her legs under the cover of darkness to keep them from withering away completely, and it was the most painful thing she had ever done, but it was also the first time in 7 days she had felt like a person with a future instead of a corpse with a plan. On the 8th day, the guards made the announcement she had been waiting for, which was that the prisoner in the corner bunk, the one who had not moved in over a week, was to be removed and buried with the other dead, because the camp could not afford to keep a body that was taking up space and drawing rats. And when she heard those words she felt a rush of terror and relief so tangled together that she could not tell where one ended and the other began, because this was the moment everything had been building toward, and it was also the moment when a single wrong twitch, a single accidental breath, would get her shot on the spot. The 9th day dawned grey and bitter, and she heard the cart coming before she saw it, heard the creak of the wheels through the thin walls of the barracks, and she lay as still as she had ever lain while 2 guards lifted her off the bunk and dropped her onto the wooden planks like a sack of frozen grain, and the fall knocked the air out of her lungs, and she had to fight with every ounce of will she possessed not to gasp, not to open her eyes, not to flinch as they tossed a rough cloth over her face, and then the cart began to move, and she was being carried through the gates, carried past the guard towers, carried past the place where she had watched so many others walk and never return, and she could hear the camp growing quieter behind her and the wind growing louder, and she knew in that moment that she was the only living person in the history of that camp to leave through the front gate on the back of a corpse wagon. The cart stopped at the edge of a shallow trench, and she heard the guards grumbling about the cold, heard them dragging bodies off the cart one by one, heard the wet thud of each body landing in the pit, and when their rough hands closed around her ankles she went completely limp, let herself hang like the dead weight she was pretending to be, and then she was falling, tumbling down into the trench, landing among the other bodies, and she did not move, did not breathe, even as the sound of the cart wheels faded into the distance and the silence of the Siberian tundra closed in around her. She lay there in that mass grave for what felt like hours, listening to the wind and waiting, because she knew that if a guard had stayed behind, if anyone had doubled back to check, then all of it, all 9 days, would have been for nothing. And only when the sky had gone fully dark and she was certain she was alone did she begin to move, clawing her way out from beneath the frozen bodies, and the horror of that climb is something she would carry for the rest of her life, but she did it. Dragging herself up out of the earth like something being born, covered in snow and death, and then she ran. She walked through the wilderness for days with no food and no map, moving only at night to avoid the patrols, and there were moments when she was certain she would die out there in the white, certain that the Gulag had won after all, But every time she thought of stopping, she remembered the 9 days she had spent lying still, remembered that she had already done the impossible once, and she kept walking, one frozen step after another, until at last, more dead than alive, she stumbled into a village on the far side of the forest, where a farmer's family, too frightened to ask questions, hid her in their barn and fed her until she was strong enough to move on, and from there she slipped across the border and disappeared into a life of quiet, secret survival, never telling anyone what she had done until she was an old woman who finally understood that some stories are too important to die with the person who lived them. And that is the part one keep coming back to, the part that stays with me long after the story is over, which is that Sister Maria did not escape because she was stronger than everyone else, or braver, or luckier, because she was none of those things. She escaped because she refused to let them take the one thing no guard and no gulag could ever touch, which was her will to live, and that will carried her through 9 days of lying among the dead and out the other side into a life she was never supposed to have. So now I want to hear from you, because if this story moved you even half as much as it moved me, drop a comment below and tell me the one thing you would never be able to survive if you had to, because I read every single one of them, and the comments on this channel have become something beautiful, a place where people share what keeps them going, and I would love to hear your answer. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, someone who is going through their own version of those 9 days right now, then share this video with them, because you never know whose life a story like this might save, and that is the whole reason the Secret Nun exists. To keep these hidden stories of courage alive so that no one who fought to survive is ever forgotten. Thank you for being here, thank you for staying until the very end, and if this is your first time on this channel, welcome, because there are so many more stories just like this one waiting for you, and the only way to make sure you don't miss a single one is to hit that subscribe button and become part of this family, because the bravest people in history were almost always the ones no one noticed, and it is our job, yours and mine together, to finally give them the attention they always deserved.